Trinidad is 4,828 kilometers squared, and its capital is the coastal city of Port of Spain, which is located at the northwestern corner of the island. In 1796, the name was changed from Puerto de España to Port of Spain under the British rule. The area has been greatly expanded and developed over the years and is still experiencing changes. The Caribbean islands are small island developing states, and all face the limitation of inadequate areas of land to enable greater development. One solution is urban expansion. Extension of the coast is an approach that has been adopted for Port of Spain. The environmental impact of development on the coast, where the city is located, is linked to the displacement of the mangroves in the area through the reclamation and the filling of degraded areas. Will the accomplishment of this aim have negative environmental repercussions in the future?
Okay, so you're asking me for a history of the Port of Spain. That is actually quite a big topic. If we go back to the 17th century, there was no coast there, it was all mangrove. Okay, the mangrove actually had to be cut back to allow the transfer of goods into St. Joseph, while the island was still Spanish. In fact, most ships prior to that time used to land further south near the Pitch Lake, so they didn't clean up the boats. The big changes through the Port of Spain waterfront actually came in the early 1940s. Okay. First of all, there was the draining of the area currently occupied by those big hotels. That used to be a place called Corbeau Town, after all the vultures that would turn over the garbage there, so all that had to be drained.
Our beautiful Port of Spain in the 1940s, the highest points are the trees and mountains. Now, the skyline is framed by skyscrapers. In the 1950s, the Brian Lara Promenade was modest and surrounded by simple two-story buildings. Today, it is the lungs of the vibrant city nested within the middle of these high-rise buildings. Historically, we can see in 1896, the coast was naturally deeply concaved, docked with the colonial vessels. Now, in recent years, docks are commercial and shipping vessels, and the shape has drastically changed. There is a prominent bulge with a jetty that docks these ships. The world-famous Hyatt Regency Hotel and the original breakfast shed, to name a few that make up the international waterfront.
Wrightson Road and the docks were built by the Americans between 1942 and 1944. The man, the engineer in charge, was called Wrightson, if you ever wondered where the name came from.
Historically known as the St. Vincent Jetty Light, built in the 1880s at the base of the St. Vincent Jetty, clearly in the ocean. Today, it is known as the Port of Spain Lighthouse and is in the middle of Wrightson Road.
All right. That is a very, very good question. But in the context of Port of Spain, while we are in fact surrounded on one side, already on two sides by the coast has never been something that we have control over, largely because the coast falls within the remit of the Ministry of Marine Resources, Land Resources. So that Port of Spain per se, even though we have sea lots and all of that, our remit is somewhat restricted in that we go to the sea, we don't have anything to do with it. Land that borders the sea, much of it is the port of Trinidad and Tobago. And the other aspect of it falls in that very depressed neighborhood called sea lots. Again, much of it has to do with ports. So that we really have a very small bit of land, sea coast, that would be something that we have some kind of direct control over. And that would be along the foreshore road. We have not seen, thankfully, anyone trying to reclaim land there, and we have not seen anyone trying to do anything negatively, so that in more ways than one, in terms of our responsibilities to the coastal areas, we are in a fortunate position.
Over the 18th and 19th centuries, except to say, of course, that the land was gradually reclaimed. Okay, a lot of the original boat traffic that had putting ships out in the shallow water there and transport by small boat. But in the 18th and 19th centuries, they began to build walls and so on to bring these ships right into the shore.
When you merely put a new, as it were, isthmus, is that what you would call it? A piece of land jutting out into the sea. Notwithstanding the size of the isthmus or whatever, it must impact the flow of the tides and the movement of currents. And when people do that, other people suffer as a result of garbage and what have you coming from other points on the coast. And we have seen that certainly in the Cocorit neighborhood. So that if we had the control over the coastal lands, certainly people would not be able to just do whatever they wanted to do.
Okay, so since then, it's basically been replacing stuff that already exists. Okay, there is very little original building left from the early docks. There is an 18th century warehouse in the grounds of the ferry terminal. You can see it on the right as you walk in. Obviously the lighthouse is original, but everything else has just been a matter of building and building and replacing, particularly the containment dock, which is being built.
We are about 1 centimeter away from hell. And that's the reality. Wherever you look in Trinidad and Tobago today, somebody's doing something obscene and stupid as it relates to the land use in the country. And the coast is not immune to that abuse.
The consequences, well, there are 1 or 2 issues which have to be kept in mind. First of all, of course, is that coast, that ground there, is gradually sinking. Okay, and combined with sea level rise, then that will have quite an impact further down the line. Secondly, we've had a spate of building very large multi-storey buildings on what is essentially reclaimed marine clay, and I'm not entirely certain that they're as earthquake-proof as they should be. Certainly the ground is not suitable for tall buildings. Okay, there is a risk of liquefaction there, should there be a big earthquake. The third impact, of course, is like a lot of cities built on harbours, a lot of the traffic is concentrated on that very narrow coastal strip. That tends to happen in a lot of cities where you have docks, but over periods of time, usually the transport networks move away from the docks. Here we can't, because there's no other way in or out of the city. So it has the unfortunate effect of concentrating all the through traffic along that Wrightson Road area, which is undesirable again, first of all in terms of traffic management, and secondly, of course, again, if we have an earthquake, it's going to make it very difficult to go anywhere. So it was certainly essential for the growth of Port of Spain. Port of Spain's an interesting name actually, it's not really a name, it's a description. So you have a capital city which doesn't really have a name. It was essential obviously to the commerce and development of the city. That doesn't mean that present day developments are as essential. I have to say that the construction of the movie town complex is a little bit cheeky, because obviously they've drained mangrove swamp to create that, and we try to preserve mangrove as much as we can at the present time on an ecosystem basis. But I couldn't see that they could have done it any other way.
Do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And if we do the right thing in terms of land use policies, you and I would not be having this conversation.
The coastal development study of Port of Spain proved vital
as it explained both city and urban space use dynamics, as well as the unique historical background in which Caribbean islands can possess. Furthermore, it depicted how all factors, including its small size, play a role in its development to achieve a high economic status. With this being said, questions on sustainability within concepts of land and environmental changes was poorly answered. It can be concluded that long-term consequences of inadequate urban planning is least on the minds of those in authority. Rather, short-term outcomes seem to be the driving force behind development running parallel to an increasingly demanding demographic. After completing this study, it is clear that the government's vision of development ignored the environmental impacts that developing the waterfront, whether through land reclamation or otherwise, would have not only on the environment, but the city's future as well.